Okay, we've got to talk about North Korea. Now, this is one of the most, I think this is like an eye-popping case from your report, where there's this like complex, long-running employment scam run by North Korea on US companies. So, and Claude is involved. So first of all, before we even get to Claude, talk us through what the scam is here.
Yeah, so ignore LLMs for a moment.
Yeah. This is before AI. We don't need AI necessarily.
Exactly. The scam started before LLMs became a thing, which is really took off during COVID, where North Korea wants money to fund their weapons program, but they're sanctioned. So how do you receive that source of income? One method is getting a job as a remote IT worker with a company. And surprisingly, hundreds of companies have hired North Koreans without knowing, and this has funded tens of millions of dollars to the North Korean weapons program. And this is typically somebody who's highly trained in North Korea, goes to the university, so they have language context, they have cultural context, and they have the technical skills to go through an interview and do this job. And that is what is starting to shift with Claude and AI systems.
Right. So just to reiterate, like in the past, you would have needed a lot of training. You'd have to go to Scammer University to learn this stuff. But actually now...
You don't need to know English. You don't need to know the cultural context of the United States. And you don't need any technical skills, because Claude can help you through each of those barriers. Claude can say, well, it's a great translator. Claude can help you answer very strange turn of phrases within the English language.
Right, yeah, there were a couple of, what were the examples of phrases that you guys found?
Yeah, like an example is like someone asking Claude, what is a muffin? And so Claude says, it's this round dessert that's often sweet and eaten for breakfast. And so then the person follows up with, well, what's the difference in a muffin and a cupcake? And so like very simple things.
So what is the difference in a muffin? I'm going to have to ask Claude that later on.
I don't know the answer either.
Yeah. Anyway, carry on.
So examples like that, or like quoting a phrase from a coworker of like, we just had our first picnic of the year, trying to understand what that means. What is a picnic? Why do we have them yearly? And then maybe another one that I found actually a bit entertaining was the actor actually like provided some ASCII art of like an emoji doing something and was like, what are these characters?
What is this? What is this thing?
Yeah, so that's the little, not necessarily like the picture emojis, but the ones that are made up of punctuation marks. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, so it's fascinating. What's shifted here is, on one hand, you can think this is incredible. Claude's helping people overcome language barriers. Claude is helping people understand cultural context.
Right.
Claude is helping somebody code who doesn't know anything about even what Microsoft Outlook is.
Yeah.
That seems like a brilliant thing, but in this very specific context, it's helping them land a job and maintain those jobs at a high level of quality.
The phrase you use in the report is, it's helping them maintain the illusion of competence every day. And I thought, don't we all do that? Don't we all have to maintain that illusion? But in this case, their employers and their colleagues are talking to them every day.
That's right.
And they're not realizing that this is a completely fake person who is in fact a scammer in North Korea.
A persona that's been created by Claude or by somebody in North Korea that doesn't really exist, with an educational background that doesn't really exist, with skills that are being
like a resume with a bunch of history on it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oftentimes you'll see like they'll take the project plan from their project manager, like the tasks that they need to complete, and they just throw the whole thing into Claude and say, what do I do? How do I get started?
Again, not super dissimilar to what a lot of people do.
I do that too now.
Yeah, exactly. Are they actually doing economically useful work for these companies?
I think they are, yes.
Right.
They're being productive, otherwise they get fired.
Yeah.
They're being productive employees, and that's a part of this scam, is sometimes these employees are considered high performing because it's might be one individual or many individuals doing the job. But this is what's so, I think, critical to take away with this case, is before you need a few highly trained individuals to go out into the market, get a job, and then maintain a job, now North Korea can just use really anybody and just say, hey, use Claude, and then you can get the job and maintain the job, which allows you to get more positions, apply to more positions, and from North Korea's perspective, get more revenue. And
maybe this is a silly question to ask, but I think it might occur to people. How much money do you think North Korea are making from this? They're making tech company salaries, right? And they're presumably using that money to fund their weapons program and whatever else they need to run, given that they live under sanctions. How much do you reckon overall they earn from this kind of scamming?
We're seeing these actors get jobs as AI developers. Those people make quite a lot of money sometimes.
Right. Yeah.
And just like general like coding jobs, which typically are high salaried. So they're being pretty effective with this, and they're not taking jobs at like call centers or something like that might not pay as much.
Yeah.
Maybe that's something they used to do. Now they can take technical positions.
They're Fortune 500 companies that you're finding that are being affected
Yeah, they're
by this,
targeting
right?
all the way up to Fortune 500
Yeah.
companies. Smaller startups, medium-sized companies, large publicly traded companies.
I assume this is happening at the level of the North Korean nation state. I assume this is also happening on the level of groups, right? Are there other smaller groups that are doing this? Do we have any idea about that? Is that something that you pick up?
Yeah, I think of it in maybe like two ways. The first is there's certainly other groups and other nation states that are running this employment scam where they're trying to land a job without actually being the person who's applying. That is becoming more common over time. The other twist that you might want to think about as an individual that's listening to this conversation is what's been going around for a long time, which is an employment scam where I receive a job that is not a real job and I go apply to that job, but actually it's a scammer who's trying to harvest information from me or get me to download ransomware. And that's something that we're also seeing happen more often, and that's leveraging AI.
So again, it's like the vibe hacking thing. It's lowering the bar at which you need to the skill bar for doing these.
Exactly,
complex.
which I think the two big implications there is when you can do more scams, more cyber attacks, you can scale more because there's more people that are enabled, or a sophisticated actor can leverage Claude to scale themselves. So really, you have to think about the number of scams or the number of pieces of fraud that are going to be out in the world, and they might, I would suspect, increase over time with the rise of AI.
What are we doing specifically about the North Korean thing? Have we? There's this scam, but there's also another part in the threat intelligence report where you guys kind of noticed another North Korean operation and stopped that. So maybe talk about how we're responding and how we're spotting these North Korean.
Yeah. So the North Korean case is tricky. Like 80 to 90% of their use of Claude looks like a typical person doing development tasks.
Right. You're asking for work, just coding stuff. You're asking what a cupcake is. Like that. These are normal things. They're not saying develop malware or anything like that.
About 10% of what we saw looks suspicious, and that's kind of like our needle in the haystack that we have to find among all of the traffic.
But you can't use Claude in North Korea, right?
Correct.
So they must be using some like VPN system to evade that.
Yeah. So the 10% is like the type of activity was focused on like interview fraud. So we could see them developing fake resumes. We could see them trying to answer interview questions.
Right.
Now, the other way, which you just alluded to, of finding them is using the infrastructure that they're coming from. This activity is widely investigated across the security community, both in the government and in the private sector. So there's a lot of information sharing happening there. People tracking what infrastructure are they operating on in order to access Western sites. And so we're engaged in those communities, and that's helping us continue to find activities like this.
And there are success cases here, and there's one that's in the report that you mentioned that I think is worth calling out, which is there was another North Korean group known as Contagious Interview, and their MO is to try to lure people into applying to fake jobs to install malware on their devices.
Right.
Now, we know that this group tried to use Claude based on their infrastructure, their IPs, their domains, but we shut them down before they issued a single prompt based on that suspicious activity. So this is something we're always working on, is finding and detecting these folks, sometimes before they even do anything with our AI product.